Hi, I wanted to make a quick video about the difference between Vedic astrology and Western astrology. And this is not to say that one's better than the other, it's just to explain the difference and why I have chosen to study Vedic astrology in depth and to kind of leave Western astrology behind. So the first big difference between Vedic astrology and Western astrology is that Western astrology goes off a fixed point in time, which is called the tropical zodiac. And that says that the first day of spring is always the first day of Aries, and that never changes. And at one point in time, that may have been true. But because the Earth is not perfectly round, it has a little bit of a bobble in it. And so the timing is always slightly changing every year as to when the sun actually moves into Aries. And so Vedic astrology calculated that bobble and therefore has always kind of the first day of Aries is always kind of changed just slightly over time. And so in Vedic astrology, the first day of Aries is when the sun actually moves into the constellation of Aries in the sky, and that's even according to where NASA says that the sun is at. So it's actually where the sun is in the sky and not just a figurative place saying, oh, the first day of spring is always the first day of Aries. And so oftentimes you may have been told your sun sign was something that it's actually the sun was not in that constellation on that day that you were born. So it's about 24 days off. And so most people will actually be the sun sign that is before the one that they have always thought that they were. And that is where the sun actually was in the sky, even according to NASA. So that's number one. Number two, in Vedic astrology, the most important sign is not the sun. So if you were to look at a Vedic astrology zodiac reading, you would not look under your sun sign. You would actually look under your ascendant or your rising sign. And the reason that the ascendant and the rising sign is more important than the sun sign is because, for one, the sun only changes, your sun sign only changes every 31 days, whereas the ascendant changes every 2 hours. And so it's much more independent to the time that you were born. And so you could be born on the same day as someone else, but you're going to have a more specific ascendant because that time changes every 2 hours than just like a generalized sun that encompasses people born under a 30-day time period. And so this is more individualized. Second of all, the ascendant, and this is actually true for tropical astrology too, but the ascendant, whatever sign that is, so let's just say your ascendant is a Aquarius, then your first house is going to be Aquarius, ruled by Saturn. And then that means that your second house will be Pisces, ruled by Jupiter. And this is important because whatever sign is ruling whatever house in your chart is going to kind of shape your personality. And so therefore, the first house being the house of the self, that whatever sign that is going to represent more of who you are. And then the second house is the house of values, and whatever sign that is going to show what values you have. And then the third house being the house of interests, whatever sign, in the case of Aquarius, your third house would be ruled by Aries, and that's going to show that your interests would be something that would be very Aries, like very driven, very passionate, and those types of things. And so it definitely describes your personality more distinctively, which tropical astrology does this as well, but it still does not give priority to your ascendant when you are looking at a horoscope for like the month of August or something like that. And then another big difference between Vedic astrology and tropical astrology is that the second most important sign is the moon, and then the third is the sun. So the moon represents it represents our subconscious, our mind, our emotions. And so really kind of describes how we handle the life that we have. How do we find peace easily? Are we disturbed? Are we more likely to be peaceful, or are we more likely to feel isolated and frustrated? And it kind of shows some of our temperaments more so. And so again, that kind of describes more of your personality than, say, the sun, which is our soul's highest purpose. And this shows kind of where we're trying to go and how we're trying to get there. And so that is less about our personality and more about our destiny. And so while the sun is still very important and we always want to look at it and see what the sun says about us, it's not necessarily the most important and influential sign or influential planet in our horoscope. And then another really fun thing about Vedic astrology is that you have the 27 nakshatras. And nakshatras are the moon's lunar mansions, is one of the ways that it's described, but it's the path that the moon goes through, these 27 nakshatras, as it goes around Earth, and it shows the moon's path, and it tells this really awesome spiritual story about our life here on this planet and how the moon influences that based on which nakshatra that it's in. And so we take an even deeper look at your moon sign by looking at the nakshatra. And the nakshatras also show how your dasha cycle or your karmic lessons will unfold. And so the dasha cycle is this really cool calculation that shows where you're at right now in your life and how your karmas are unfolding. And it is very specific, and it's a great way to give detailed information to someone about where they're at in their life cycle at the moment and kind of how those things are going to continue to unfold based on this cycle. And it's all about timing. And so you can get a really precise prediction on how things and when things will unfold, which the tropical zodiac does not have the nakshatras and it does not have the dasha cycle. So it cannot go as in depth as Vedic astrology can. And then another important difference is in Vedic astrology, they use only the planets of Venus, Mercury, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. And they do not really consider Uranus, Neptune, or Pluto. And the reason being is that it takes somewhere between around 7 years for Uranus to go around the sun, and then Neptune's like 10 years, and then Pluto is 20 to 30 years, whether that's even a planet or not. We're not really decided on that entirely yet at this point. And so a lot of that time, like that means everyone born in a 7 to 10 to 20 year time frame has that same exact planet in that same exact sign. So it's not very individualized, and it more encompasses like a generation. And so it's fine to look at it from like a generational perspective, or to even look at it in time of like, okay, over the next 10 years, as Uranus moves into Aquarius, we may focus more on inventions and being forward thinking and maybe sticking up for people and injustices and things like that. And we can look at it from like a large perspective, but it doesn't necessarily affect us on this individual level. And so it's important to kind of look at more of these inner planets and really see how those are affecting us and put our attention more on those individual planets that can really show us where we're at an individual level. And then last but not least, one of the main reasons I ended up being more intrigued by Vedic astrology, minus the fact that it's what's actually happening in the sky and not just a figurative point in time, that it actually goes off of what NASA says is happening in the sky. One of the other reasons I love it so much is because I have been studying yoga and the Vedas for many years now. And when I found Vedic astrology and realized that all of the teachings of the Vedas and these yogic teachings are actually in Vedic astrology, and it's a way of plugging in all of these teachings into like a real world map of your life and who you are. it just, everything started to make more sense for me as far as my yogic studies had gone, and then pulling it all into the way that the earth and cycle is as well, and kind of tying these two different philosophies together. And so if you're someone who's been studying yoga for a long time and want to kind of go deeper into the teachings, Vedic astrology is a wonderful way to bring the teachings into like your real world life. And so anyway, I hope this video was helpful for you and kind of gave you an idea of the differences, and maybe even makes you a little bit more curious to learn more about Vedic astrology.